Geelong at the moment? What are your thoughts and where are people buying?
Yeah, so market is currently at a vacancy of 0.7%, and it's been
Crazy.
obviously as stock levels go up and down, but it's been generally low over the last couple of years. And the demand for that has been either, it's not necessarily just cheaper properties or more affordable properties. Obviously, if something is clean and in the affordable property range, it's going really, really quickly, but also high-end properties. So whenever we have a property that's sitting 750, 800 in that range, it's going off like hotcakes as well. The mid-range properties to that 480 to 550, there tends to be more stock than the other one. So it tends to sit a little bit longer, but 0.7%, it's going quick anyway. So doing the investor support services and being on the ground, the pockets for buyers that I'm seeing, they're looking in the south, which is like Belmont and Grovedale areas. There've been a lot of buyer activity in there if they've got that higher range of that sort of 600 to 750 range to get into there. But then also if you're looking in that sort of 450, 500 entry level, people are looking at the north, which is Corio and Norlane. And then the east, which is Newcomb area. So it just gives both options depending on what price range you're looking at. But we've never been known for good yields. And when comparing to other states, unless you've held onto the property for say 10 years and paid it down, 5% really is sort of punching a good yield in Victoria. But hopefully the announcement of granny flats will just open up a new opportunity for investors to get better returns, or even just to see it as an opportunity if you've already got a property in Victoria.
So what can we now do in Victoria? Like what's the gist of this thing?
The dot points, yeah.
So,
what do we?
Yeah, definitely look at the amendments to get the full list, but just the key rules. The first announcement that came out was about the change of planning permit. So if the granny flats are less than 60 square meters, then you don't need a planning permit anymore. But it's as long as your block size is larger than 300 square meters, has no environmental overlays, flooding, meets the site and zoning title requirements. So that's when it's very property specific and specific to the title requirements. Small second dwellings now do need to include a kitchen, bathroom, toilet. So it needs to be a second home, not just a couple of extra rooms for... They haven't specified laundry, but that may come from council to council.
Yeah. Laundry is a big one, usually.
Yeah, that's exactly right. There won't be any restrictions with how small, how it can be used, like being able to rent it out now. And like we said before, it was for family or private use, but now they can be rented out, but has to meet the requirements. It must... And they're saying that it can only be one extra small dwelling on the lot, but then there's a little section that says, but if your property can do it and based on council, so maybe we can have more depending on the property. So that's just been opened a little bit as well.
You've got 3 granny flats on the back.
No.
Is there a like lot size that we can put one on?
Minimum lot size is 300 squares. So you have to have 300 square meter block, but you do have to meet the requirements of how much garden and privacy and all that sort of thing as well. So there's a minimum garden area of 8 square meters of private open space for a second dwelling to have.
Yeah, it's crazy. Well. I thought originally it was 450 square meters that we were talking about, but I'm looking at a brochure now, and it says 300 square meters. Yep. That's insane. Like, so you could have, like, I mean, the house would have to be tiny. Like, could you just imagine, like, having 2 dwellings on a 300 square meter? I mean, I suppose that's what they do with townhouses and all that sort of stuff. But yeah, it's crazy, isn't it?
Yeah, and that's the thing. It's changing the mindset around what it will be like if you do have just a standard property and then you end up putting a second dwelling on it. It will change the mindset of maybe who's already renting there. Do they want to share? What is the privacy going to look like? So there's going to be a lot of those considerations that Vic haven't had to consider yet, but we can take a lot of help from, say, Queensland and WA and things like that have been able to do that for some time. So because it's such a new announcement, and it's really going to be one of those proof in the pudding sort of things, especially with council requirements, that once the process starts, there's going to be a lot of grey areas that may need to be ironed out while we're going through this process, because just because the VBA have came out with the announcement doesn't necessarily mean that the council are going to know exactly how to handle situations. So I was talking with, just relating to the local council today, City of Greater Geelong, and just getting a bit more sort of information about how they would handle certain things, because there's a lot of questions that are coming up, such as, are there going to be separate bins? Are there going to be, like, how is that all going to work? And utility connections, how's that all going to work? And what they said was the real grey area that is, just for looking at from the council alone, is when you go through a planning permit, it requires you to have separate utilities, to have separate connections to electricity and water. But if you don't have to go through a planning permit, then where does that leave it?
What do you reckon are the long-term risks in granny flats and that strategy, or that?
I like the idea of the fact that the planning permits were removed to try and make it quicker as such, but I'm still glad that you have to get a building permit and have to get a surveyor involved, 100%, because there's a lot of those site requirements, and just you don't want to just put it on there and just put a cheap property on there and think that it's going to do something, because at the end of the day, it is an asset. And if you're putting something that's of value and you're putting money into it, you want to be able to get value back, especially if you're going to do resale as well. So I would definitely do a lot of due diligence and get the details, get the numbers, start looking at some information around what, if you are looking at spending sort of in that higher end of that, like 120 to 150, and what would that get you for the granny flat in return, by just comparing to what other properties in that market are doing, not necessarily granny flats, but units and things like that. So then you can get a bit of a gauge of what return you're going to get, and then taking the into consideration, such as privacy, to make sure that it is going to be a solid investment in somewhere where people actually want to live, because that's going to be the biggest thing.
Yeah.
Because at the moment, I was looking up, generally Geelong, you're sort of looking around that sort of 3.5, maybe if you're really lucky, 4% yields. If you're really, really lucky, if you buy
how much?
ridiculously well, maybe. But I was sort of saying, if you could put a granny flat on for sort of, let's say 150, and it rents for, I don't know, would you, if it's done really well and done properly, it would probably rent for anywhere between, say, 270, maybe 300, but let's just say 270. So I should have done that, but I was thinking, what's that? Let's just call it 300, just to quit. I'm being generous tonight. So 300 times 3 times 5. We'll allow 2 weeks vacancy. That's 15K extra per year. Plus, I haven't done numbers, but I worked in my head that would increase your yield to sort of around your sort of 5% sort of mark. Your thoughts on that sort of, the type of investor that would buy that sort of, because everybody says, as soon as they say Victoria, it's like the yield is terrible, I can't buy there. What are your thoughts on the impact of granny flats for that type of investor who says, oh, it's too hard, yields don't make sense?
Look, at the end of the day, it comes down to everyone's personal circumstance. Some people need higher cash flow. Some people do it for capital. That's, Geelong or Victoria.
Those are the two outcomes that we get out of property, right? It is cash flow or capital growth.
Yeah.
That is it.
Nothing really changes. It's either the numbers work or they don't work. That's really the reality of it. I see this as an opportunity for investors that may already be in Victoria, and they're looking at what they can do to diversify or to increase their income. And if they say, for example, we're thinking about buying another property, but they may not be able to, or they may have a little bit of money that they want to want to put in, but they can't necessarily buy a property or whatever circumstance they're in. That might be something that they're willing to consider. But it really is a pioneer's market at the moment. It's really going to be whoever's going to really start the process and see how it goes. There's a comment saying, I think I should be investing in granny flat business as opposed to an M buyer. And it's I only talk about this and bring this up because when anything becomes popular, everything is going to increase. Because granny flats started going up because it was a cheaper option, family living together, all that sort of thing. It was the same as when the new regulations came in for compliance and safety audits and things like that. You had a heap of people coming through because it had to be done. You were seeing prices through the roof of having safety audits and all that sort of thing done. And now that it's become more normal, you're not seeing those price gouges anymore because now it's just, not saying they've been called out, but now it's more of a normal thing. So of course, when anything becomes popular, and granny flats did become a popular housing option during COVID for across Australia as well, and it just became more popular. But there are different, just like any other housing, there's going to be different ranges. But having, as a point was made before, now that these new amendments and regulations have come through, just make sure you do due diligence on what you're looking at and whether it actually is going to meet the requirements to have it as a rental property.
Yeah.
This is a way to create affordable ways to hold Victorian granny flats, hold property in Victoria. For me, I feel Victoria has done a dip. COVID hit. It didn't boom crazy like other states did. It's been the ugly cousin. It's putting pressure on the government. That government has put pressure on investors. They've made it very not investor focused. But you can buy a property that was once valued at 700,000 and you can now buy it for 600,000. What? Where else can you do that? They have a massive undersupply at the moment. For the next 1 to 2 years, I think we're kind of slowly bottoming out, and we're going to hit the bottom, and we're going to stay at the bottom for a little while. But over the next year, 24 months, you're going to start hearing a whole lot more out of this, and there's going to be a lot more opportunities. The data's going to start to swing. Because people are going to be buying a property for 600,000 and they're going to be selling it for 650,000. Oh, that's cool. Okay. Oh, now, what? 700,000. But if you can't afford to hold this property in Victoria and you think there's a good opportunity there, but you want to hold it, maybe you're tapped out for borrowing capacity, but you have a boatload of equity that you can pull out, get a granny flat on the back of your property, use your equity to do that. That's going to make the cash flow position easier to hold, and you can then continue owning that property in Victoria and ride the capital growth wave that you're eventually going to get. Not financial advice, as we always say.
Just on that point, though, Joe. So it's more if you have a small amount of borrowing capacity, because if you have equity, like you could have $5 million of equity, but if you can't tap that equity if you don't have borrowing capacity. So it's if you have a small amount of borrowing capacity.
If you have just enough to be able to afford to buy the granny flat, pull out like exactly like what you were talking about, Jeff. I don't have $500,000 borrowing ability or $600,000 borrowing ability. What am I going to do? You can withdraw $200,000 worth of equity, but I want to be investing. I want to be in the game. How am I going to continue my journey? I need to help with my cash flow. Well, you spend, if we look at it, so realistically, a granny flat is probably going to get, I don't know. I know we were saying 250, but I think 300 for a brand new, nice looking granny flat. 300 times by 52 divided by the purchase cost of $200,000. That's a 7.8% yield. That's pretty bloody good, right? That is your investment because you already own the dwelling, or you're thinking about buying the dwelling. You want to own the dwelling, but you need to help with the cash flow. So 7.8%, people are spending money crazy like that. So if you can get a 7.8% yield, where else can you get that? By manufacturing the value. Will the property price drop? I don't think so. I don't think it's going to drastically drop.
do you think works best for granny flats? Because great, you hit the 300.
That's a great question, actually. Fantastic
Yeah,
question.
what actually works from a practical perspective, in your opinion?
In my opinion, it's going to come down to livability and privacy. So the blocks, I would say that if you would I consider putting it on a 300 square meter block? Don't know. Especially if you're looking at renting it out to a separate couple, things like that. I think it would probably be too close for comfort if you're going to be renting it out separately. That's just my personal opinion, though. Just thinking about what tenants are usually looking for, and even if they're doing that sort of share situation, you still want a little bit of privacy. So I probably wouldn't jump at doing it on a 300 square meter property. And it would all just come down to privacy, but I would focus less on the block, especially when it, like, yes, look at the block when it comes to privacy and stuff, but I would look at where the block is located and what suburb it's in and where the demand is. Because as we said before, it might be a 800 square meter block and it might be perfect for it. But if the demographic is more family who want the yard, then I wouldn't be jumping at putting a granny flat on it.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
So where would you probably avoid? Where would you reconsider if you're doing a granny flat in Geelong? Probably like your height and sort of those kind of areas,
more expensive areas.
Central areas, close to amenities, close to universities.